as a parent and as a pediatrician, I really feel like it's so important to make things practical and doable and fun too. And so in my book, what I lay out are what I call the 5 things for microbiome magic. And these 5 things are 5 things that we do every single day. But if we learn how to just make little shifts, tiny little shifts in how we're doing them, we create a foundation of microbiome resilience. So the first is nourish. How are we nourishing our microbiome? That includes, what do we get in? What we want to get in are what I call our 3 Fs, our microbiome champions.
I'm Riley Rees. This is the Sophia Unfiltered podcast where we bring together thought leaders, wellness entrepreneurs, makers, and emerging health leaders. We're here to have raw, unfiltered conversations because sharing your stories has the power to change lives, help others heal, and transform the way we take care of ourselves. Here we go. Welcome to Sophia Unfiltered. I'm joined today by Dr. Elisa Song, a Stanford-trained integrative pediatrician and the founder of Healthy Kids, Happy Kids. If you've ever felt like conventional medicine wasn't giving you the full picture of how to support your child's health, this episode's for you. Dr. Song breaks down the 5 foundation of kids' health that too often get missed in standard checkups, from gut health and sleep to breath work and emotional resilience. She shares simple strategies parents can use every day to help kids feel better, think clearly, and grow strong in body and mind. Dr. Song, thank you so much for being here. We can't wait to jump into this conversation today. For our listeners who may not know you, do you want to give them a little bit of background intro?
Yeah, so I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me. I am an integrative pediatrician, pediatric functional medicine expert. I started my practice, it was called Whole Child Wellness, it's now Whole Family Wellness, back in 2004. So over 20 years now, with the knowledge that all of the conventional training that I had had served a purpose. There's a time and a place. But as we were sort of moving along, and we are moving along in history, our kids are really just continuing to get sicker and sicker despite conventional medical advances. And so I opened up my practice with an integrative approach and a functional medicine approach. I love this way of thinking because it allows kids to truly thrive from the inside out. We're practicing true prevention. And when kids get sick, which unfortunately many kids do nowadays, when they get sick, we can use our integrative tools to really try to reverse what's going on and heal kids from their chronic illness.
Now, a few things to unpack here for our listeners who may not know. Starting your practice all those years ago, the integrative and functional approach was really not the forefront.
No.
What really brought this together, this holistic, kind of approach?
Yeah. And actually back then, it wasn't even called integrative. The term integrative is a relatively new-ish term to really signify that when we're taking this approach, it's not throwing the conventional baby out with the bathwater. We're not saying never ever to conventional medications or conventional interventions. What we are saying is, hey, let's take an approach that integrates the best of all worlds, recognizing that there are unintended, negative, long-term adverse consequences of many of our medical interventions, and try to use diet and lifestyle, functional medicine, whatever tools we have. I happen to use homeopathy and essential oils and acupuncture, but there's so many other tools out there like Ayurvedic and, Reiki and all the things. And so, back when I was starting, it was called, quote, alternative medicine. You can see we've come a long way now. There actually was a department in the National Institutes of Health called the Office of Complementary and Alternative Medicine to kind of look at this. And even those terms, right? Complementary means the primary is still conventional, right? And then this is just on the side, or it's alternative. And so now we know it does not have to be either or. And in some cases, these quote alternative treatments or these other modalities besides conventional medicine actually should be the primary form of medicine. And then we use conventional things like prescription medications as the side only when needed, right? And so, when I started my practice, it was an interesting time. I didn't have a lot of support, a lot of guidance, even in functional medicine. When I trained at the Institute for Functional Medicine, there was no pediatric training. I had to kind of piece everything together. And over the decades, I've sort of created foundations and protocols that work for my patients. And then I realized, you know what, there's just not enough pediatric integrative and functional medicine out there for families who are looking and parents who want this kind of care. And so that is when just probably about 9 years ago, I started my online platform, Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, to really try to reach families who are looking for an evidence based approach that they can trust. Not sure if Dr. Google is telling you all the right things, right? And so from a pediatrician standpoint, how do I integrate, all of these modalities into my practice when your kids have an ear infection or when they have anxiety or if they have ADHD? And now I'm actually really fortunate that I can reach so many practitioners too. This is the only way we should be practicing medicine. So I have a practitioner membership too that trains practitioners to really go out there and get comfortable using these integrative approaches for children because that's when we're going to make the biggest difference in our future generations of health. It starts when kids are young. Those foundations of longevity are set when they're babies. And so we want to empower parents and empower kids to know, look, if we start young with all of these foundational diet and lifestyle ways of life, then maybe you won't have to biohack like your parents, or your grandparents. Maybe we can, have a future where 1 in 2 kids doesn't have a chronic health concern.
Speaking of foundations and longevity and how all of this is pretty much set, you mentioned when they're young, you mentioned a terrifying statistic. Nearly 1 in 2 kids have a chronic condition.
I know. I mean, if that doesn't make you stop in your tracks, I mean, one thing when I was starting my practice, I opened in 2004, opened my doors up, solo practitioner. In 2005, the New England Journal of Medicine wrote an article. It was a sort of projecting our lifespans and noted that for the past centuries, our lifespans as a population has been increasing. We've been living longer and longer because of medical advances. However, in 2005, it was noted that due to diet and lifestyle related diseases, our kids now, for the first time ever in history, were expected to have shorter lifespans than their parents. Now, when I read this, my jaw dropped and I was like, "Oh my gosh, we need to be doing more." And that really, kind of lit the fire under me that we have to get this information out to parents, to practitioners, to policymakers and make a difference. Fast forward now, this is 20 years later, we're not in a better state of health. Now, there are some things moving. There's more awareness about, artificial food additives, even our infant formula sometimes, but there's not enough. And we have to keep pushing and keep growing that awareness because that is not okay. That, in your mommy and me group, you could be looking around and there's 10 kids, half of those are gonna have something going on, whether it's reflux or chronic constipation or eczema or anaphylactic food allergies are so common now, and we can't accept that common is normal. This should not be the case for our children.
And do you think a lot of this is accredited to food? And you said it's food, diet, and lifestyle, right? We know there's
Yeah.
environmental factors, is
Yep.
medications, potentially antibiotics. Like, is this something that parents actually are doing, or is this stuff in our food that we just really can't control?
It's a combination. Every
Everything.
child, every family has their own, I mean, unique path, unique story. What it really, in my mind, comes down to for most kids is a disruption to their gut microbiomes. We know how important gut microbiomes are for health overall. But for children and infants especially, their developing gut microbiome is so key to their developing immune systems and to their developing brains, even their future hormones and metabolic processes. And what's really amazing is, on the one hand, children's and even adolescent microbiomes are disrupted pretty easily by the way we're living, the diets we're incorporating into our families, the environmental toxins we're exposed to, and on the flip side, they also can change for the better pretty easily if we know how to do that. And so this sort of plasticity in their developing gut microbiomes gives us as parents opportunities and practitioners to say, you know what? Just because diabetes runs in the family or autoimmunity runs in the family, it's not set in stone. Your child's microbiome can really hold that key to unlocking a positive epigenetic future. which I love. And that's exactly why I wrote my book, because that sets the foundation. It explains to parents and practitioners and kids how the microbiome is so important, why it's so important, what happens when the microbiome gets disrupted, and how we can take care of our microbiome so our microbiome can take care of us. And it's a funny thing because I'm watching the book, and initially it was really, in the categories of course, children's health and family medicine. But I'm watching now the teen and young adult category is getting higher and higher. I'm having teenagers and college kids reading this and saying, "Wow, okay, I didn't know this growing up." And is that part of the reason why I had such anxiety or such depression, or my skin was so bad, or I just didn't feel right, and starting to make shifts. And I truly believe that if kids and teenagers and young adults understood the why of keeping their microbiomes healthy, they would want to implement these positive changes. And if we teach them how, they can continue to do that into their young adulthood. I mean, that's what we want as parents, right?
The fact that you said that teens or in college kids are looking out and saying, "What's going on? I need to fix this." To me, that's a huge news about where we can go.
And I feel like that's what we as parents and even as their doctors, their pediatricians should be empowering kids to do. To question, "Hey, hey, Dr. Song, like why should I take this, not just medicine, but even the supplement? What is it doing for my body? Are there any side effects I should be looking at?" So we also don't want them to, of course, I mean, this is my son now. He wants to be an athlete, right? He's 13, he wants to be strong and a soccer player. So he's looking at all of these different supplements that are being recommended by these influencers. I'm like, buddy, let's same thing that we do with food and we look at the label. Let's look at the label of these supplements and really be savvy about that, because we don't want to sabotage your goal of becoming strong and fast and agile on the soccer field by dumping supplements that are, number one, a waste of money. Number two, actually could do some harm.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So you mentioned, the child microbiome and the disruptions to that. Do you have like 5 top tips that you can give parents to help with that? Just to be more specific, like as a mom, I'm like, okay, gut microbiome and I don't want it disrupted. I don't even know where to start with that.
Yeah. Yes, and it can get really overwhelming
Yeah.
as a
Right.
parent, right?
Right.
Or I mean, as a parent or an individual just thinking, "Oh my gosh, do I have to live in like a sanitary bubble?"
Right.
Which actually is probably more inflammatory, being in a lonely little bubble. We know the power of community and the importance of that. So, the key is to not be afraid of living in our modern world, because when you really start to look at the data, you can think, "Oh my gosh, there's nothing quote safe." Right? There is going to be lead, unfortunately, in almost every vegetable that's grown in the ground, because our soil has become so contaminated. Does that mean we should not eat any vegetables? No, because those vegetables also have phytonutrients and ingredients that help us detoxify those heavy metals, as long as we are not sort of overloading our capacity to clear things out. Now, when it comes to the microbiome, your microbiome wants to return to the state that it was in before any insult. So, ideally, in the ideal world, we would lay down a healthy, resilient microbiome so that if there is a toxin that comes your way, or, like an artificial neon green cupcake that, is eaten at a birthday party, or, whatever it is, that their microbiome, okay, it gets a little disrupted and then it can bounce right back. And so I want to, as a parent and as a pediatrician, I really feel like it's so important to make things practical and doable and fun too. And so in my book, what I lay out are what I call the 5 things for microbiome magic. And these 5 things are 5 things that we do every single day. But if we learn how to just make little shifts, tiny little shifts in how we're doing them, we create a foundation of microbiome resilience. So the first is nourish. How are we nourishing our microbiome? That includes, what do we get in? What we wanna get in are what I call our 3 Fs, our microbiome champions. So fiber, phytonutrients, which is a pH, but it sounds like an F, right? And fermented foods. If we just think, how do we get these in? And I have a whole chart called the Whole Gut Rainbow Chart with all of these. Now, the surprising thing for many people is, in terms of fiber, the category that of foods, the color, I should say, that packs the biggest fiber punch per bite are the tan foods, like our legumes, our beans, our nuts and seeds. Those have so much fiber. And a lot of times that is not a major part of our diet. So just think, how can we get that in? So now, for instance, oatmeal, it's a whole grain, has fiber in it, but now when we have oatmeal, I lay out we have tins of, pumpkin seeds and walnuts and hemp seeds and, I mean, whatever nuts we happen to have in the cupboard, we just take them out, right? And then you can add them to your granola for a little bit more fiber punch per bite, right? Phytonutrients is color, and for color, if your kids are not the most varied eaters just yet, then try to think, okay, what can we get in even if it's the same food but a different color. So if they love broccoli, well, we have at the farmer's market, sometimes we can find purple broccoli. That still counts. Each color has a different phytonutrient that actually we don't use as human beings. Our microbiome uses those phytonutrients to convert them into compounds that are so healthful for our brains and our immune systems. And then fermented foods, a lot of people think, I don't know if my kid's going to have sauerkraut. It's not the favorite thing just yet, right? Well, we wanna think creatively about fermented foods too. In my book, I have a recipe for fermented blackberry lemonade, or you can ferment fruit that you just put into a smoothie, or you can blend up and make into popsicles as the weather's getting warmer. So thinking beyond just sauerkraut and kimchi and, I mean, now I have some kids when you start young, right? I have this one, he's I think he's like 15 months, and sauerkraut is one of his favorite foods because they started it young. In our modern world, though, even for families who are eating, really, really healthfully, there's always a way we can up level. So there's no judgment on where you're starting from, but I have parents and kids think about how can we make each meal pop with plants on purpose, right? Because if we're not mindfully thinking about it, the sad truth is nowadays in the United States, on any given day, 1 in 2 kids doesn't have a single vegetable, and 1 in 3 kids doesn't have a single piece of fruit. Now, if you think about, a typical, okay, so maybe for breakfast, I have kids who might have some pancakes or waffles or maybe some eggs and bacon and go out the door. No fruit there or vegetables. And lunch, they might have a ham and cheese sandwich and a bag of chips, right? No vegetables there. So maybe they get some vegetables at dinner. But if we think again, every meal, is there something I can do to add? Like, why not just, be prepared, rinse a side of strawberries or raspberries? I mean, my kids, if it's out there on the table, they will eat them. Right? It's just that, sometimes you're in a rush, and like, "Oh, I don't wanna wash the strawberries." Well, if we take the time, it will be there, right? Or on their sandwich, could you just even throw 1 spinach leaf in there? Just something or pack, a little thing of baby carrots, and the chips. So just, thinking every time we're eating, how can we get a little bit more microbiome nourishing nutrients in? Our kids get older, maybe even more important to know there's 2 parts to nourish. There's what you wanna get in and then what you wanna keep out, okay? Because as our kids get older, my kids are teenagers now, and they're going out, making their own food choices with their friends. When they're off after high school, living on their own, they're gonna be buying groceries for themselves, making their own purchasing decisions around food. So I think that one of the most important life skills we can teach our kids, starting when they're young, is learning how to read food labels.
They're gonna be so ahead of the curve when they
Yes.
realize, "I'm gonna go eat this, and then I'm not gonna feel good." I mean, it takes adults decades to realize, "Oh, I'm gonna have too many glasses of wine, and I'm not gonna feel good the next day.
Yeah,
Stop
yeah.
doing this to myself." So for teens, I think this what the work you're doing is so inspiring.
And here's the thing, there are more and more choices that we can make so that if we can just take the time to look at our choices and know which choices are in our local grocery store, the ones that are safer go-tos, it helps us and it helps our kids too. Just helping kids make those decisions. And it's not just making, knowing what to put back, it's knowing what the alternative is. Because I also don't want my kids going out with their friends and feeling like, okay, now I can't eat anything or drink anything and they're just sitting there, right? Because that's not helping either. It's helping them learn how to identify in that moment what is the best they can do.
So we have Nourish for the
That's right.
microbiome.
So there's nourish. Remember I said there are 5 things, right? So we nourish, get the good stuff in, keep the bad stuff out. And then there's also the 3 that can be maybe a little easier to start with for some are movement. So move, exercise. Exercise can improve your gut microbiome independent of diet, which is fascinating. And it doesn't mean that you should eat all the junk food that you want to, but it means if your kids are, really picky right now, and it's stressing you out to think about how to get more plants in their diet, start with moving. Make sure that they're moving at least an hour a day. It doesn't have to be consecutive, but getting out there, getting the heart rates up, running around the block, going on a family bike ride. So making movement a priority. If they're on sports, awesome. But we all know that a lot of times in sports, there's a lot of standing around, right? So you want to make sure that it's active movement an hour a day. And that's also, for us as parents doing it with them, it helps us too, right? And then hydration. So better water drinkers were found to have healthier microbiomes than people who drink less water, right? Which kind of in a way it can make sense when you think about, what happens when you don't drink enough water? A lot of times we get constipated. So when you are constipated, you're keeping in all of the waste, the garbage that your body's trying to get out. And so that can shift the kind of bugs that wanna grow in your gut, right? Just think if you never take out the garbage, you're like, "Ooh, boy, okay, what's growing in there?" Right? And so water drinkers, in fact, in one study, better water drinkers were found to actually also, interestingly, consume more fruits and vegetables. So and you wanna make it concrete. So what's an estimate of how much water your child should be drinking? You take their weight in pounds and you divide it by 2, and that's the number of ounces of water they should be drinking on a normal day, not when it's sweltering hot, not if they've been running around sweating a ton, but on a normal day. So if you have a 50-pound kid, and so you're thinking, okay, so maybe on a normal day, I want them to have about 25 ounces of water. And then we make it even more concrete. A lot of kids have 12-ounce water bottles. Okay, let's make it a contest. Let's see how you feel. We're going to have 2 of these each day, minimum, right? And then you use that water bottle from the moment they wake up, just have them fill that up. They'll drink that and hopefully drink all of it by the time school ends. And then when they come home, they drink another one of those and just notice how they feel, right? And then the final one, so we have nourish, move, hydrate, sleep, and then the fifth one is breathe. Now, breathe has to do with how we engage our vagus nerve and how we learn to manage our stress. Because stress, chronic psychological stress has been found to disrupt the gut microbiome and cause and trigger leaky gut within 1 hour. So it's not that we should never have stress, because that actually, interestingly enough, is more stressful than having some stress that you can manage. So when we learn how to breathe and engage our vagus nerve, which is part of our parasympathetic nervous system, the rest, digest, and recover part that balances out our sympathetic fight or flight response, then we can engage our calming response and our healing response that then will improve our gut microbiome. And when we do that, when we engage our vagus nerve, that can improve our gut microbiome also independent of diet. So, for your kids and for us as adults, learning how to regulate our nervous systems, also one of the most important life skills we can teach our kids. There is not a scenario in life where we're going to have zero stress. And as I mentioned, that's actually not healthy to have zero stress. Unfortunately, though, in our day and age, we just have too much stress coming at us, right? And our kids and our teenagers have not learned the tools to manage that, because one of the most common ways to manage stress is to ignore it, avoid it, cover it up, just listen to music, pretend it's not there, right? So we need to help learn how to get our nervous system in a state where we can manage stress effectively. And why I call it breathe, when we're breathing in a way that engages our vagus nerve, it helps everything fall into place. There's something called heart rate variability is one of the best predictors of current and future health, hands down, which is why so many of the things that we do, like cold plunging or altering saunas and cold plunges or red light therapy, can improve heart rate variability. Well, one of the ways that we can improve our heart rate variability is through vagus nerve exercises. And I call them vagus nerve exercises because when I used to call it mind body exercises, that kind of gets a little eye roll like, oh, I'll do that when I have time. But I want to impart upon families that this is actual medicine. It's a prescription. It's one of the most important prescriptions I can write because when we engage your vagus nerve and improve heart rate variability, yes, you'll feel calmer, happier, manage stress better. But that to me is just a really beneficial side effect. The real reason for me as a pediatrician that I want kids to do this is because it lowers chronic inflammation. It helps to balance your blood sugar. It regulates your hormones. It, of course, helps you manage stress, right? It balances your metabolic processes. There's so many. It's like a snowball effect, right? When you engage your vagus nerve, I mean, so many things in your body will start to click in, and it is one of the final healing pieces that is necessary when you have chronic disease. And, oh, yeah, you get to feel calm and good while you're doing it, right? So, but that's not because when we say, "Oh, it's to feel calm, manage stress," that is where a lot of people think, "Well, I don't have time for that right now. I'll do that later."
But when you're talking about all of this with blood pressure and everything else and chronic stress, this is amazing. Is there a quick how to engage vagus nerve that you can tell us?
Yeah, yeah. So this is so important. Remember I said one of the most important life skills is to learn how to read food labels. The second is to, well, they're both even, both regulate your nervous system. So that's why I have a whole chapter on breathe. Like it is an entire chapter on engaging your vagus nerve with simple exercises that anyone can do at home. But the reason it's called breathe is when we learn how to breathe and engage our diaphragm, that instantly kicks in your vagus nerve. Okay. It's the only way we have to control and regulate our vagus nerve. Because when we're stressed, what happens? Our heart rate's beating really fast, right? Our pupils are dilated. We don't have a lot of variability in our heart rate when we're breathing in or breathing out. So that's where that term comes from. Because in a calm state, when you feel your pulse, and sometimes how kids feel their pulse, and just notice their breath, right? Slow it down a little bit. And then as they breathe in, your heart rate should speed up. And as they breathe out, heart rate should slow down. Your heart rate should vary when you inhale and when you exhale. When we're stressed in fight or flight, it's just no matter if you're breathing in or breathing out, it's just fast and there's not a lot of variation, right? So breathing slowly can make our heart rate vary more. There's nothing else we can do that does that. We can't tell our heart rate to slow down when we're stressed, right? But if we just sit our breath, and the way to do that is with diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. There's a big muscle below our lungs that inflates in our lungs and deflates our lungs. So what we want to imagine is that there's a balloon in our belly. We keep our shoulders down and it can help to hold your hand to your chest so that you're not moving your shoulders or your chest when you're breathing. You're only engaging your diaphragm. And as you take a slow breath in, the balloon in your belly is inflating fully. You can hold it at the top. And as you exhale, the balloon in your belly completely deflates and you hold that at the bottom a little bit. And then you can do that 10 times and you will notice you're more calm, you're actually more alert and aware of what's going on. If you were to measure your heart rate, it would have more variability. We're not breathing through our chest and our shoulders, which is what we've learned to do. And so simply learning how to do that, and I love teaching kids and teenagers how to breathe in this way. It's so simple sounding, but we've forgotten how to breathe this way because we're sucking in our bellies and we're kind of tense all the time, right? But doing kids can do that anywhere, anytime, and nobody's gonna look at them funny, right? They don't have to go and do something in the corner that makes them stand out and they feel a little awkward. We have to breathe anyway. So if we just learn in the moment, let's just breathe with our diaphragm, belly breathe. We can calm things down and then go on to what we need to do.
I mean, it seems so simple.
It does. And yet, so here's the thing. The most simple things can lead to the most profound changes. But simple isn't always easy because
Right.
the simplest things are the things that we actually have to do ourselves,
That's right.
right?
It's not a
I
pill.
can't give you a pill to do it.
Right.
Exactly.
The meditation, the mind body connection, which nobody wants to hear about. I'll do that later, like you said. We're kind of putting it to the side, but it's all of these kinds of practices that I feel like can make us better or maybe not have so many chronic illnesses for our children
Yeah.
and
Abs-
hopefully increase their longevity because that is a terrifying to know as a parent. That's the forecast for our kids.
That's right. There's a term now, not just lifespan. Doesn't necessarily matter how long we live if those later years are not healthy, right? So we want to improve their lifespan and their health span. I mean, we want to make sure that for us too. And the thing too, even for adults, even if you have chronic health concerns, simply by just focusing on your microbiome, going back to the basics, there's 5 things for microbiome magic, you will improve whatever else you're doing for your health. I mean, that is the foundation. When I'm working with kids to heal their leaky gut, or maybe they have some yeast overgrowth, gut dysbiosis, whatever's going on, we have to get to the foundations. We have to always return to those 5 things because otherwise, no matter what supplements I give you or medications I give you, it's going to be more of an uphill battle. You lay those foundations on knowing that the microbiome then can improve your immune health, your brain health, your hormone health. So many things will fall into place. So there's less work that has to be done on the other end of it.
It makes sense. And it almost seems like this should be the standard way to get care. And I'm surprised it's not.
I know, I know. And it's interesting in the book, in the introduction, I have a section that really resonate with a lot of doctors and even a lot of parents too, because I write, a list of all the things I wish I had known and been taught
Oh, cool.
medical school, right? And I have a lot of doctor friends who are like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had known. Like, why didn't we know? Why weren't we taught this?" Right? And thinking back at all the patients that you realize, "Oh my gosh, if I had done things differently," right? Now, here's the thing, we can't ever go back in time. Like, even as a mom, like, I think, and I was a holistic pediatrician when I was pregnant, but even now, I think about the tuna fish sandwich I had when I was 5 months pregnant with Kenzie, because I was just craving it. I'm like, "You cannot go back and undo that. What you can do is just use that to tell your child's story, your story, right? Your health story, to know where you are now and what got you here. So now you know what things need more investigation, right? Because if we didn't know that, then you would never think, oh, my child with anxiety or my child with, rheumatoid arthritis or my child with ADHD. Oh, yeah, we should look at their gut microbiome, right? Especially if their poops look fine. You wouldn't necessarily think it's a gut issue.
Right.
But now we know it is a gut issue
You wouldn't think
almost
that
all the
unless they have the leaky gut or something's going on. You're right. I would not, you wouldn't make that connection.
time.
That's amazing. Dr. Song, thank you so much for being here. Before you go, we have a question that we ask all of the guests. If you could share 3 fundamental pillars that contribute to your well being.
I would say the number one pillar is sleep, the number one. It is one of our, if you could bottle up all the health benefits of sleep in a pill, I mean, you would have the cure for so many different things. And I know for me, because I track my sleep and I track what happens to my heart rate variability and my resilience scores afterwards. And, sure, of course, depending on what you eat, if you've had a glass of wine or if you've exercised too little or too much, that impacts, but it is always sleep. And sleep, when I get enough sleep, when people get enough sleep, your brain works better, you're more tolerant, right? If your kid's done something that you're like, "Oh," or your partner, right? Your memory is better. We just function overall better, right? So I'd say sleep. Number 2 is trying to find joy every day, right? It doesn't mean, ignoring the things that are really stressful. What it does mean is that no matter what's going on, there are always going to be moments that you can find some joy, whether it's just, I'm lucky I have a window right here. I can look out and I often see a hummingbird, flying out there. I mean, just stop in that moment to just enjoy that. Right? Before you get back to the 100 emails that you have to respond to, right? So just taking whatever moments you can throughout the day. And then the third I would say is, gosh, I mean, it's connecting with family, right? We're also, I don't know a single parent who says they're not busy. Right? I mean, I don't care what kind of job you have, and yes, being a stay-at-home mom is a major job, right? And so it doesn't matter. I mean, we all have so much on our plate, right?
I just
Um,
started calling it mom strength because it's
yeah,
really unbelievable what women can do. Nobody will understand that unless you've had a child.
yeah. And people are now recognizing the mental load that's on you, and so, what's really important for me when I get home, I'm not saying this is easy, but really forcing myself, like, leave the phone over there. Do not give into the temptation to just do a couple more emails, right? And just sit, have a family dinner with Peter, my husband, and the kids, right? And just even if it's just for a little bit, because now that they're older, I mean, they're getting home from soccer at like 9 o'clock, right? And so it gets later and later, and the time gets more and more compressed. So just like when you are present, when I'm present with my kids, it means being fully present for those short periods of time where we have. And then all the rest, then I know, okay, if my mind has to be scattered, that's okay. That is life. That's teaching them that, in their busy worlds as they get older, they are gonna have to multitask and do all the things, right? But having those mindful, completely present moments with your family or your friends or whomever it
Love that
is really important.
because your work is never done.
Yes,
You're still
yeah.
home. But having that, okay, everything's house is a disaster, toys are everywhere. I'm gonna have that time with my child. I think that's incredible because we have these phones so much next to us, they see it.
Oh, yeah. Yes, for sure. And modeling that because our kids I mean, they're growing up in an age that so different than when we grew up. And it's connected yet not connected because that the way of being connected on the phones is different than just being present in person. And I mean, it's interesting too. One of the studies with teenage girls found that yes, we know that social media is one of the major reasons that's propelling, adolescent anxiety. But even with that, the most protective factor was the amount of in-person connection. So even if they were on their phone, doing social media or whatever, the same amount as another person, another girl, another adolescent, having that in-person connection, face-to-face time, like going to the mall together, like my daughter likes to do, and like walking with her friends and gabbing, right? Like that is so important. So that's where, really creating those opportunities for your kids to be in person and not have to be on their phones to connect is so important.
Yeah, community, which you mentioned in the very beginning. Dr. San, thank you for sharing all these amazing tips. And then hopefully our listeners can connect with you. Do you want to send them to your website? We can link to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the best way to connect to me is on my website, healthykidshappykids.com. And I'm most active on Instagram, which is healthykids_happykids.
Thank you so much, Dr. Song. I appreciate all of this advice as a new mom. I appreciate it all.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. This has been Sophia Unfiltered, a podcast by Sophia Health, the #1 marketplace for health and wellness. Find services, classes, and products from the top health and wellness providers. Book an appointment or join live classes now. I'm your host, Riley Rees. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section of your favorite podcast provider or with a 5-star rating. Let us know what your biggest takeaway from this episode was, or share it with someone you hope to inspire. Join us again next time for more real conversations, stories, and insights that help empower you with the knowledge and inspiration needed to transform how we care for ourselves.